So welcome to the channel. Today we're going to look at a different topic. We're going to be looking at an aviation related topic. I have a background in aviation and I wanted to do this all along, but this seems like a good place to start. It's in the news a lot, and I'm using a new program that I haven't used before. It's called a mind map, and it helps keep track of all the working parts and moving parts of this. So I actually got the idea for this from another YouTuber, Robert Govea. He's an attorney based out of Arizona, and he covers legal matters and legal things that are in the news currently, court hearings and dockets and things like that. So if you're into that kind of content, make sure to go check him out. I'll leave a link to his page in the description below, as everything in this presentation will be linked in the description below, so you can look at the full documents. I may not have the full videos, but the full videos will be in the links, and I may have cut up some of the videos just to show you the important parts to reduce the amount of time that it takes to play these. So in this mind map, we're looking at Alaska Airlines, flight 1282. That's the one where the mid-exit door plug departed the aircraft unexpectedly. So we're going to be looking at the NTSB. The NTSB put out a video on January the 8th this year. I have reduced it down to a couple of clips that I just wanted you to see. In there, she mentions ETOPS and parties to the investigation. So I'm going to go over those and what those entail and what that is. If you don't know what ETOPS is, this is going to be a very simplified, completely simplified version of what ETOPS means. She gives you a little bit of description, but this is going to go in more detail. We're going to look at their preliminary report that they put out. There's a couple of images. I mean, you see a lot of images all over the line anyway. I just got a couple of them here. But one of the main things is there's a video animation of how this door is supposed to operate. So we're going to be looking at that. So we'll look at that first when we get into it, so that you go into it with a knowledge of this is how this door is supposed to work, or plug is supposed to work. Then we're going to come down to the FAA. So we'll see what the FAA did. They put a SAFO, a safety alert for operators, on the 21st of January. They've been updating what's going on with this since January, and the latest update is 3/4/24. We're going to see what airlines and regulators have done. Then we're going to scooch on down to the DOJ. Apparently, they're launching a criminal investigation. And the FBI also, they have sent letters to passengers letting them know that they could be a victim of a crime. Then we'll come down to Boeing and see what they're saying. So first of all, apparently, Boeing says it can't find the documents on the door that blew off from the maintenance that was done to it. And they're also looking to buy back Spirit AeroSystems, a company that they sold, I think it was back in 2005. And we're going to see a little story about that and see what's going on there. The CEO apparently is going to step down. I think he's going to step down somewhere at the end of the year. And we'll see some of the names that they're floating around as replacements for the CEO. We also have this Air Safety Network. So if you want to research something like this, the Air Safety Network is a good place to start. They'll have information in there. They're not responsible for correctness or completeness. So it's just a place to start where maybe you can go there and get some information to start looking at stuff. And so you can compile your own information if you're interested in it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at the NTSB. So like I said, first, we're going to look at the this video showing how the door is supposed to operate. If I can get it to open. So we see that it's showing the upper bolts, lower bolts. This is the lower hinge point. This is the upper guide and roller. And you'll notice these bolts actually act as latches. So a regular door would have a latch that would open and close it, but these bolts actually act as the latch so that the door cannot move. So now you have a basic understanding of how that's supposed to work. So let's go and look at the couple of images. We'll go ahead and get those out of the way. So here's the outside of the door. I guess I have the other image, but you can see it here. The inside of the fuselage, what it looked like after the door blew out and it landed. So let's go to the press briefing that they gave on 1/8/24, and we'll look at a couple of those short videos.
Our systems group focused on the cabin pressure control system on the aircraft. This is the auto pressurization light that illuminated that we have gotten a lot of questions on. This system is designed as a triple redundant system with one primary cabin pressure controller. It's a computer system. There is a secondary cabin pressure controller, that's a secondary computer system. And then there's a manual controller. So it's a triple redundant system. That means that if the primary controller fails, the flight crew switches to the secondary controller. If that fails, they can switch to manual. Any one of these systems is fully capable of maintaining safe cabin pressurization. In fact, if either one of the computer systems is inoperative, the FAA allows the operator to continue flying the aircraft. We have verified from the maintenance logs that the redundant system operated as designed on December 7th, January 3rd, and January 4th, going into the alt mode, not needing to go into the manual mode. At this time, we have no indications whatsoever that this correlated in any way to the expulsion of the door plug and the rapid decompression.
So let's go to this next video talking about ETOPS.
With respect to the ETOPS restriction, Alaska Airlines reported to the NTSB that their internal policy is to restrict aircraft with multiple maintenance write-ups for certain aircraft systems from flying ETOPS flights for a period of time. That's not required by the regulation. That is an extra step that Alaska Airlines put in place. Now, ETOPS stands for Extended Twin Engine Operations. What that means is that ETOPS permits twin engine airplanes to operate over a route that contains a point further than 3 hours flying time, 3 hours for this aircraft, from the nearest airport. And the restriction was put in place per Alaska as an extra step to ensure safety and to allow them to conduct maintenance.
Now, I've heard it reported on a couple of sites that Boeing or the FAA, I don't remember who they said, but had restricted the aircraft. And she just clarified that it was Alaska Airlines that said, we're restricting it for ETOPS. They took their own steps in restricting it because of this issue. And she said this plane is ETOPS rated at 3 hours, which is 180 minutes. There are different ETOPS ratings. We're going to look at the ETOPS video here in a second. But this one apparently had a 3-hour or 180-minute ETOPS rating. Let's go ahead and look at the ETOPS video that I put together, cobbled together, so you could understand what ETOPS means.
The U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, 14 CFR Part 121, regulates ETOPS operations. ETOPS stands for Extended Operations. The ETOPS area for twin-turbine engine-powered aircraft is when the aircraft is beyond 60 minutes from an adequate airport, using one engine inoperative cruise speed under standard conditions in still air, also known as drift down. Flights that operate beyond 60 minutes from an alternate airport require ETOPS authorization. To explain the concept, let's consider the following example. Assume your airline wants to fly from A to C, New York JFK to Madrid, Spain. There is one adequate alternate airfield, B, within range, and that is Terceira Island, Lajes. The 60-minute rule is indicated by the red lines, which show the maximum range the aircraft can be from an alternate airport at any time. As a result, the flight is not permissible under the 60-minute rule. However, if a 120-minute ETOPS authorization is received, as indicated by the green lines, the flight may proceed to its destination following the route AXC. Based on the 120-minute area of operation, flight from New York to Madrid is possible with only a small deviation from the direct route as originally planned. ETOPS authority was established to allow twin-engine aircraft to fly between the U.S. and Europe. There are a number of ETOPS authorities available based on your operational needs. For example, there are ETOPS authorities for 75, 90, 120, 180, 240, and beyond 240 minutes. At this point, there is an ETOPS authority available to accommodate almost any city pairing in the world. Typically, the 120-minute ETOPS authority is obtained to allow twin-engine aircraft to fly between the U.S. and Europe. However, the 120-minute ETOPS authority would not allow twin-engine aircraft to fly between the U.S. mainland and Hawaii. As a result, 180-minute ETOPS authority is required for twin-engine aircraft to reach Hawaii from the mainland. For a route to be legal under 120-minute ETOPS authority, it must lie entirely within circles representing 120 minutes flying time from an adequate airport. For a route to be legal under 180-minute ETOPS authority, it must lie entirely within circles representing 180 minutes flying time from an adequate airport. This concludes the ETOPS lesson.
So there are several ETOPS ratings that can get. Now, this doesn't by any means describe what has to go into getting an ETOPS rating. I mean, there's equipment, airports, fire and rescue. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it and what they have to do. So even an aircraft with a lower ETOPS rating, they may have to retrofit it and upgrade it so that it gets a higher ETOPS fitting. And I mean, it's just all cost analysis based on the airline and what they do. If they're flying, if they need an ETOPS route, they'll have to have an airplane that can make that ETOPS route. So let's look at the preliminary report that they put out. We're going to go through this a bit. Let's start at the top. So this is the preliminary report for N704AL, which is the 1282 Alaska Airlines flight. Go ahead and January 5th, 2004, about 17 minutes flight. The Alaska 1282 returned to Portland International Airport after the left mid-exit door plug departed the airplane, leading to rapid decompression. It landed safely without further incident. All occupants, 2 flight crews, and all deplaned at the gate. So we're going to look at some figures. So this is where I got some of the photos. So these are better pictures, so you can just see what's going on. So here's the inside and the outside of it. So the photos of the location of the missing mid-exit door plug. We're not going to look at everything here because some of it is just what the flight crew went through, exactly what the flight data recorder said and everything showed what happened and everything. So we're going to skip over that and just go to some more pertinent information. Now there is a flight data recorder and there's a cockpit voice recorder, although the cockpit voice recorder, there's a little disturbing information when it comes to that. So let's look at this. So the CVR and the FDR were removed from the airplane and brought to the NTSB's Vehicle Recorder Laboratory in Washington, D.C. for download of the data. The accident airplane was required to be equipped with a cockpit voice recorder that retained at minimum, the last 2 hours of audio information, including flight crew communications and other sound inside the cockpit. A CVR starts recording when the aircraft is powered on and will continue to record until the aircraft is powered down or the CVR is deactivated, either by a loss of electrical power after a major event or by manually deactivating the CVR circuit breaker after a less severe event. So 2 hours, that's all you get. So the CVR was downloaded successfully. However, it was determined that the audio from the accident flight had been overwritten. So the CVR circuit breaker had not been manually deactivated after the airplane landed following the accident in time to preserve the accident flight recording. This is a problem. I mean, it should not be in their checklist that they need to manually deactivate this if it's not going to deactivate itself. So then it goes into what the flight data recorder recorded. We don't need to go over all that. The operator information and airplane information, how long the plane has been in service. So we get to the mid-exit door description. The airplane was equipped with a mid-exit door plug option, which Alaska Airlines has selected based on its desired seating configuration. Benefits afforded by the plug include more passenger comfort, lower density of passengers, reduced weight, full-size passenger window, a structural component that does not have the complexity of a door with its associated parts. So this is the location of the left and right mid-exit door structure. These are how it would be depending on which configuration you're in. So here's a door that's activated. Here's a deactivated door. And here's the plug. So the MED plug with a standard window, each were located 26th row and left side of the plane. So here's the accident. The accident MED plug was manufactured by Spirit AeroSystems Malaysia on March 24th, 2023. So that's where it was made. And it was received at Spirit AeroSystems Wichita on May 10th, 2023. The MED plug was then installed and rigged on the fuselage. Spirit AeroSystems fuselage line 8789 before it was shipped to Boeing on August 20th, 2023. The fuselage arrived at Boeing's Renton, Washington facility on August 31st, 2023. So it was installed and rigged by Spirit at this Wichita facility, and then was shipped to Boeing Renton. So the MED plug is primarily constructed of aluminum, installed in the fuselage by means of 2 upper guide fittings and 2 lower hinge fittings. We saw those in the animation. The 2 upper guide fittings are located on the upper sides of the plug. So the guide is on the plug. The roller, or the guide pin, is on the frame of the plane. And the upper guide rollers that are fixed to the upper sides of the fuselage opening. 2 lower hinge fittings are fixed to the lower section of the plug, and engage with the two lower hinge fittings that are attached to the bottom of the fuselage opening at the lower. So let's look at figures 4, 5, and 6. So here's 4. So this is the area where the upper guide and pin are, and these are the lower hinge fittings at the bottom of the plug. So AA is here. So this is the rod and the hinge fitting, and the bolt that latches this in place so that it doesn't move is right here, supposed to be installed here. And this is the guide and the roller. So the guide is on the door itself, and this roller is attached to the fuselage. So it goes up in here, and there's a hole here where this bolt goes through, which acts as a latch to keep this roller from coming back down. So these two bolts stop the door from translating. So they act as a latch. Once the plug is in place, it is secured from moving vertically by a total of 4 bolts. There is a bolt installed through each upper guide fitting and each lower hinge guide fitting. Once these bolts are installed, they are secured using castle nuts and cotter pins. Outward motion of the plug is prevented by 12 stop fittings, 6 along each forward and aft edge installed on the fuselage door frame. The door plug is only intended to be open for maintenance and inspection, which requires removing the vertical arrestor bolts and upper guide track bolts. The strap assemblies below the second stop pad from the top restrict the plug from opening further. So they have cable straps that actually let the door go out without actually taking it off, because they're going to still be attached at the lower hinge fittings. So here's the cable. So the door actually is hinged down here, and it just translates out so they can do any type of maintenance or inspection they need to do. The NTSB's investigation team conducted a post-accident examination of the aircraft structure, flight deck, cabin interior, cabin safety systems, and pressurization system. So pressurization, we're not going to talk about that. We know what happens when you get a big hole in the fuselage. You lose all cabin pressure. So the left MED plug was recovered in the backyard of a private residence, luckily knowing the ground was hurt. The recovered plug and associated hardware was shipped to the NTSB's materials laboratory for further examination. So here's what they've got. And you can see they are missing the spring and the sleeve right here that goes up and down where the bolt hole is. And there's a hole in this, there's a hole in this. And when they line up, you put a bolt through it, it doesn't let it go up anymore. The 2 vertical movement arrestor bolts, 2 upper guide track bolts, forward lower hinge guide fitting, and forward lift assist spring were missing and have not been recovered. See figure 5, for example. So these are the stops. This is one of the 12 stops, 6 on each side. These, when the door is in place, this part will be down here, preventing this door from pushing outward. So contact was noted on the lower sides of the 12 stop pins and fittings on the MED plug. Corresponding contact damage was noted on 12 stop pads and fittings attached to the fuselage. Overall, the damage was consistent with the MED plug translating upward, outboard, and aft during the separation. Figure 9 shows damage features at the upper forward location and is representative of the other stop locations. So here's the damage. Witness mark matching between upper forward MED plug stop fitting and stop pad fitting as received in the middle lab. Both upper guide fittings installed on the forward and aft sides of the MED plug respectively were fractured vertically through the inboard wall of the track. Examination reveals features consistent with overstress and fracture and no evidence of pre-existing cracks or damage. The outboard upper guide track bolts were intact and exhibited no deformation. Figure 10 shows the aft upper guide fitting. The forward upper guide fitting was similar. So you see, This is actually where the bolt would go through, but when it tore away, it ripped this part of the guide right out of it. So the fractured upper guide fitting, arrows point to the fractured and deformed piece of the guide fitting's inboard wall. The rectangle indicates where the upper guide track bolt would be installed. The paint in the upper guide track bolt bores were intact and showed no evidence of heavy contact damage. Figure 11 shows a representative hole bore. There were some light circular witness marks around the hole bores consistent with the presence of a washer at some time. So this is one of the holes that the bolt goes through. And you can see there's no wear whatsoever, as if there were ever a bolt in there in use. Now there is a slight bit of discoloration here that you can see where at some point there may have been a washer on there. And I would surmise that the bolt was in place when it was sent from the Spirit AeroSystems plant to the Boeing plant. And it was when they took it, opened the door for maintenance, that's when they were not reinstalled. So the aft lower hinge guide fitting manufactured from the MED plug during the event remained attached to the aft hinge fitting. The forward lower hinge guide fitting fractured from the MED plug and separated from the forward hinge fitting. The forward hinge fitting shaft was bent about 0.4 with corresponding contact damage. So this is just getting too much in the weeds for what we got to do here. So the aft hinge fitting after symbol showing that the shaft was bent. So this is the roller pin. The attachment flange on the lower aft hinge guide fitting was fractured at the two upper attach hole locations, and the bolts remained installed in the MED plug. The two lower attached bolts were fractured. All consistent with ductile stress. So you can see the damage here that came about from where it was ripped out of the plane. So let's go to the manufacturing records and human performance. The manufacturing records group traveled to Boeing's Renton, Washington facility to review manufacturing records for the accident airplane. According to records, the accident fuselage arrived at Boeing's facility by rail in August. During the manufacturing process, any defects or discrepancies were found. If they were found, a non-conformance report or an NCR or disposition required an NCR were generated. So September, so it was delivered in August. In September, records show that the NCR was created, noting 5 damaged rivets on the edge frame forward of the MED plug. These are the locations here. Due to this damage, the plug had to be opened up to perform maintenance. To open the plug, the 2 vertical movement arrestor bolts and 2 upper guide track bolts had to be removed. Apparently, there was some damage to the or some issue with the seal also. Records show the rivets were replaced per engineering requirements on non-conformance order, completed on September 19th by Spirit AeroSystems. So Spirit AeroSystems opened the door and fixed the rivets. They're the ones that did the maintenance and built the thing, so they're the ones that are going to have to fix it. And from what I can tell, it looks like Spirit was having several issues, so they actually had to have some employees at the Boeing Renton facility full time. So they didn't just come down there to fix this problem. They apparently, from what my understanding is, they have some Spirit AeroSystems personnel that are in Renton full time. And if you look at the photo documentation here, obtained from Boeing shows evidence of the left-hand MED plug closed with no retention hardware bolts in the 3 visible locations. The aft upper guide track is covered with such it can't be seen. So you can look at the image and we'll be able to see it out. Yeah, so this image was attached to a text message between Boeing team members on September 19th, 2023, around 1839 local. These Boeing personnel were discussing interior restoration after the rivet work was completed during the second shift operations that day. So if you look here, it's hard to see from here, but you can tell from here and from here that there is no bolt installed. It's pretty much buttoned up. They just have to remove the insulation back down and put the outer coverings on. So the investigation determined that the manufacturing documents were used to authorize the opening and closing of the left MED plug during the rivet rework. So also there seems to be a disconnect between the maintenance and how the maintenance is performed. So there's another guy online that I'll put a link to in the description that has a pretty good description of how things actually work there. But Boeing has its own reporting system and Spirit has its own reporting system, and they do not talk to each other. So opening of the door, if you take the door off, the plug off, then there are installation buyback requirements. But just opening the plug does not have closing the plug buyback requirements, which to me is just insane. If you're going to remove hardware that keeps the plug in place, then it should be a automatic buyback or QA inspection item. So the group reviewed applicable application installation retrofit documents, received a presentation on AAR's quality assurance and safety management system processes. The group also witnessed a Wi-Fi. So they went to an Oklahoma facility where work was done on the aircraft. And they determined at this time that there was no other work that affected that door whatsoever. They didn't open it. They didn't close it. They didn't do anything to it. What the work they had to do had nothing to do with that door. So as a precaution, Alaska Airlines grounded its fleet of 737-9 airplanes to inspect the MED plug soon after the event. Their inspections began Saturday morning, January 6, 2024. In addition, the FAA issued an emergency airworthiness directive on January 6, requiring all operators to conduct specific inspections before returning the airplanes to service. January 21st, the FAA published the safety alert for operators that have had the same MED plug as the accident airplane, but on different model of airplane. The SAFO is for Boeing 737-900ER airplanes and recommends that operators inspect as soon as possible the 4 locations where the retaining hardware secures the door to the airframe. Boeing issued multiple operator messages. The most recent, dated January 25th, contains revised instructions for inspecting the 737-9 airplanes that have MED plugs. The investigation is ongoing. So that's it for the FAA, for the NTSB. Now let's go to the FAA, and we're going to look at this SAFO, this safety alert for operators. It's not very long. We'll just read through this. Read through a little bit of it. So this SAFO informs aircraft operators under Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations. This SAFO also recommends that operators perform key portions of the Boeing 737-900ER fuselage plug assembly maintenance planning document. inspection tasks related to the 4 locations where bolt nut pin installation is used to secure the door to the airframe as soon as possible. This information is applicable to all operators under 14 CFR that operate the Boeing 737-900ER aircraft. The Federal Aviation Administration continues to evaluate data involving the mid-cabin door plug and will determine additional action as necessary. So basically, on January 6, 2024, the FAA determined an unsafe condition existing with the Boeing 737-9 MAX, and an emergency awareness directive was warranted. Recommended action: operators are encouraged to conduct a visual inspection to ensure the door plug is restrained from any movements to the 2 upper guide track bolts and 2 lower arrestor bolts. Refer to the manual. And regardless, so they also want you to let them know what you found. So they're encouraging operators to report findings to their certificate management officer, because they want to know what the condition is of all of these planes. So what else is going on? The updates. So the updates are in reverse order. So let's go a little further down at the bottom. So the FAA ordered temporary grounding of the Boeing 737-9 MAX. The FAA required immediate inspections of the certain Boeing 737-9 MAX planes before they can return to service. January 7th, the FAA's first priority is keeping the flying public safe. We have grounded the effective airplanes, and they will remain grounded until the FAA is satisfied they are safe. January 8th, the FAA has approved a method to comply with Boeing 737-9 MAX Emergency Airworthiness Directive, and it has been provided to the affected operators. I keep saying this. They want to keep the American public safe. I guess so. So in that spirit, Boeing 737-9 MAX aircraft will remain grounded until operators complete the enhanced inspections, which include both the left and right cabin door exit plugs, door components, and fasteners. Operators must comply with the corrective action requirements based on findings from the inspections prior to bringing any aircraft back into service. January 9th, every Boeing 737 MAX with a door plug will remain grounded until the FAA finds each can safely return to operation. So once again, we're still looking at not really a whole lot what these updates are. Incidents should never have happened, cannot happen again. FAA formally notified Boeing that it's conducted an investigation to determine if Boeing failed to ensure completed products conform to approved design and were in condition for safe operation, in compliance with regulation. So January the 17th, after taking decisive action to ground 171 Boeing 737-9 MAX airplanes, the FAA is now investigating Boeing's manufacturing practices and production lines, including those involving subcontractor Spirit AeroSystems, bolstering its oversight of Boeing and examining potential system change. On Friday, the FAA announced requirements for a rigorous inspection and maintenance process as a new and necessary step before the FAA contemplates any further steps in the process to return Boeing 737-9 MAXs to service. The first 40 inspections that are now part of the process are not complete, and FAA will thoroughly review the data. Not much new there. Okay, on February 28th, so we're getting further along. During an all-day safety discussion at FAA headquarters on Tuesday, FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker informed top Boeing officials that an aircraft manufacturer must develop a comprehensive action plan to address its systematic quality issues to meet FAA's non-negotiable safety standards. Boeing must commit to real and profound improvements. Making foundational change will require a sustained effort from Boeing's leadership, and we are going to hold them accountable every step of the way. Okay. You can read all this if you want to come back and read it. Let's just look at the March 4th one. The FAA's 6-week audit of Boeing and Spirit AeroSystems prompted by the January 5th incident involving a new Boeing found multiple instances where companies allegedly failed to comply with manufacturing and quality control requirements. The FAA identified non-compliance issues in Boeing's manufacturing process, parts handling, storage, production control. The FAA providing these details to the public as an update to the agency's ongoing investigation. The audit is one of immediate oversight actions the FAA took after a left mid-cabin. Okay, so we know why they're doing it. So let's see. The plan was also the findings. So basically, the takeaway here is the FAA identified several non-compliance issues. So if the FAA is involved at all, how can we continue to have several non-compliance issues, and especially from Boeing, which has had several instances which we've talked about earlier? I can't see how this could be new to them that they're having these types of issues if there's not any oversight of them until after an accident happens. So what airlines and regulators have done? Faxbot, what airlines regulators have done about Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets. So Boeing's CEO, David Calhoun, and commercial airplanes head Stan Deal will step down in a management shakeup that follows intense regulatory scrutiny into safety issues with its top-selling 737 MAX jets. So the FAA temporarily grounded 171 MAXs. 65, which were owned by Alaska Airlines. So Alaska Airlines said that initial reports from its technicians indicated some loose hardware was visible on some aircraft and in the relevant area. So 57 of the 65 have resumed flight. And Alaska has said it expected inspections to be completed over the course of the following week after the FAA gave the green light to the resumption of the MAX 9 flights. United Airlines is also a large contributor, a large holder of the MAX aircraft with 79. And they said preliminary checks found bolts that needed tightening on several planes. Bolts that needed tightening on several panels. After receiving final approval from the FAA to complete the process to return its 79 MAX 9 fleet to service, 78 of 79 United Airlines have returned to flying. The company has 100 MAX deliveries scheduled for this year, according to a regulatory filing in October. So Copa Airlines, a Panamanian carrier, has 9. Aeromexico, they have 19. Turkish Airlines has withdrawn 5 737 MAX 9 aircraft from service for inspection. So they have 5. What are the regulators doing? So the FAA allowed MAX 9 planes to resume flying after inspections were completed. It said on February 5th that nearly all planes had been inspected and returned to service since the emergency. The regulator launched a formal investigation of the aircraft on January 11th. In an unprecedented move that came with the approval to return planes to service in January, the FFA, I'm thinking they mean FAA, has also barred Boeing from expanding production following unacceptable quality issues. An expert panel the administration appointed to review the plane maker's safety management processes found on February 26th a disconnect between Boeing's senior management and employees on safety culture. Disconnect on safety culture. The report was directed by the U.S. Congress originally after 2 fatal Boeing 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019 that killed 346 people. The door panel blowout exemplified the expert panel's concerns. So the NTSB, the independent U.S. agency, opened an investigation into the incident, and it appointed International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers to the investigation. So these are parties that they've added. And we didn't look at that. I skipped over that. We're going to go back and look at that at the end of this. On February 6th, it released a report that said that a door panel that flew off a Boeing 737 MAX 9 jet mid-flight on January 5th appeared to be missing 4 key bolts. So this is what they found. Appeared to be missing 4 key bolts. The door panel was manufactured by Spirit AeroSystems in Malaysia, a former Boeing subsidiary. The NTSB said it arrived at Boeing's assembly plant in Renton. The report shows the panel had to be removed at Boeing's factory before being reinstalled. Previously, the NTSB also said the plane's cockpit voice recorder was overwritten, renewing long-standing calls for longer in-flight recordings. So they recognized the problem and didn't do anything about it. Now, the NTSB does not oversee, they're just accident investigation. But when they give a report, the FAA can actually create a regulation that says longer flight recordings. But apparently the FAA ignored, if they were long-standing calls for it, the FAA ignored it. Then we go to what other countries are doing about this. We'll doesn't really matter that much as far as what's going on with the door. Now let's go back up here because I think I skipped the final party briefing. Parties to the investigation.
We have offered party status to Spirit Aerospace and to the Machinists Union.
So what is party status? So here is a the regulation concerning party status. So it's titled under Title 49, subsection 831.11. So the ICC may designate, the ICC is the investigator in charge. Make this a little bit bigger. The ICC may designate one or more entities to serve as parties in an investigation. Party status is limited to those persons, federal, state, or local government agencies and organizations whose employees' functions, activities, or products were involved in the accident, and that can provide suitable qualified technical personnel to actively assist in the investigation. To the extent practical, a representative proposed by party organizations to participate in the investigation may not be a person who had direct involvement in the accident under the investigation. So you can have somebody from the agency or employee of the organization, but you can't have somebody that was directly involved in that accident. So you wouldn't ask the guys who put the door on to be involved in the accident. Except for the FAA, no entity has a right to participate in an NTSB investigation as a party. So the participants in the investigation must follow the directions and instructions of the NTSB representatives. Party status may be revoked or suspended if they fail to comply. So prohibitions from being a party representative. No representative may be occupy a legal position or be a person who also represents claimants. Now, once these representatives just provide information and give the NTSB things to look at and information on how things are supposed to work and what they think might have failed. But when it comes down to the report, then the parties step back and the NTSB looks at all the information and comes to a conclusion on its own. They don't depend on the parties to help them come up with a conclusion. They just depend on them to give them information so that they can provide a conclusion based on the information. And that's about it. So that's a little bit of a description on how a person becomes a party and what their involvement is. So let's go back down to the Department of Justice and a criminal investigation. Justice Department investigating door plug blowout on Alaska Airlines flight. So the Department of Justice has opened a criminal investigation into the door plug blowout on a Boeing 737 MAX 9 plane during an Alaska Airlines flight in January. This was first reported by the Wall Street Journal, saying the DOJ has contacted some passengers and notified them they are potential victims in the criminal investigation. They've interviewed the pilots and flight attendants, and it's normal for the DOJ to be conducting an investigation, Alaska Airlines said. Now, of course, Alaska Airlines would say that. This is normal. Adding that it's fully cooperating and we do not believe we are a target of the investigation. And I would say that's probably true at this point in time because it looks like it's a failure of the manufacturing process. Both the Justice Department and Boeing said they had no comment. It tells you what happened with the plane. An investigation by the preliminary found that there were no bolts installed in the door plug. Now they're saying this may be a criminal investigation because Boeing failed because of these crashes that happened in 2018 and 2019. Boeing was ordered to pay settlement. And the government said it would drop a charge of conspiracy to defraud the U.S. after 3 years if Boeing followed the terms of the settlement. So, and according to the Wall Street Journal, Boeing could face prosecution on the original count of defrauding the U.S. if in this new case, the DOJ finds Boeing is at fault of violating the terms of the 2021 settlement. So I believe this is where this criminal investigation is coming into play. I may be wrong, but yep, they are conducting a criminal investigation. The FBI's letters to passengers So Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, passengers could be a victim of a crime, says the FBI. The FBI sent letters. I don't have a copy of the letter. I'd like to have one. Some say letters, some say emails. I don't know exactly what it was. FBI sent letters to passengers following a criminal investigation of door plug blowout. Passengers of the Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, which suffered a door plug blowout, received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation stating that they could be a possible victim of a crime. Earlier in the month, the Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Boeing, which occurred minutes after the plane took off. There was no serious injuries as a result of the incident, but several passengers are suing both Alaska and Boeing after the experience. So the FBI sent letters to the passengers. The letters stated in part that the FBI has opened a criminal investigation into the incident and were sent by a victim specialist with the Seattle division of the FBI, adding, "I am contacting you because we have identified you as a possible victim of a crime." The letter also stated that the FBI cannot inform passengers about the progress of the investigation. Of course, why would they? And they go on to repeat the missing bolts, the NTSB's findings so far. The interesting thing here is records show repairs were made on September 19th, 2023 by Spirit AeroSystems personnel, employees of the company that manufactured the fuselage. Photos obtained from the Boeing floor door show the plug was closed without bolts in 3 locations. We saw that photo earlier. Boeing wrote a letter to Congress that it cannot find records for work done on the door panel that blew out. So how convenient, they can't find the records on the door panel. And they assure that we assure you, Congress, we have looked extensively, have not found any documentation. We've looked everywhere. We've covered everything. We even looked in the closet. Nothing there. Now let's go to Boeing. Boeing says it can't find documents. Can't find the documents on the door plug that blew off midair. Amid a federal investigation into what caused a door plug to blow off a Boeing 737 MAX 9 jet in January, a Boeing top official said the company cannot find documents about the door plug, and it's likely that such records never existed. So we do maintenance on an aircraft when we're building it. After it's buttoned up, we take it apart, we put it back together, and records of that never existed. Likely? I don't want to butcher his name. He's the executive vice president of government operations at Boeing, said, employees we looked everywhere. We looked extensively. We looked everywhere. And we failed to turn up any paperwork about the opening and closing of the door plug. According to Ojokli, Boeing's working hypothesis is that the documents required by our processes were not created when the door plug was open. So the documents required were not created when the door plug was opened. The letter was in response to the Senate Commerce Committee's hearing on Wednesday, where National Transportation Safety Board Chairman Jennifer Hamdi, she was the woman that was given the briefing at the beginning of this presentation, accused Boeing of withholding key information about the door plug. Ojokli denied the allegations, said the company has been committed to cooperating fully and transparently, except for providing required documents, which were apparently not created when the door plug was opened. Other than that, we're going to be fully transparent. In a preliminary report released last month, the NTSB said the door plug in question was missing 4 key bolts. One that helps keep the door plug in place. Investigators believe the bolts were not reinstalled when the plane received some repair work at Boeing's facility in Washington State last year. On Wednesday, Hamdi said the NTSB still does not know who was responsible for failing to reattach the door plug properly. Ojokli responded in his letter that Boeing has since sent over additional names of employees as requested. Well, we don't know, you don't know who it is, but we got some people you can talk to. Boeing has been under intense scrutiny ever since January 5th, when a door plug tore off at 16,000 feet and left a massive hole. Yep, massive hole. Boeing did not immediately respond to NPR's request for comment. So what is Boeing doing now? Boeing wants to buy back the company that builds the body of its troubled backed planes. Boeing said it's in talks to buy Spirit AeroSystems. This is the place that they sold in 2005 and was involved in the door plug blowout. So negotiations were first reported earlier on Friday by the Wall Street Journal and Seattle Times. Spirit shares soared 15% in tradings Friday on the reports. So troubled Spirit getting bought out, and their stock price soars. But shares had been down 10% from the time of the Alaska Air incident in early January through Thursday, and down 70% since a March 19th fatal crash, which led to the 20-month grounding of the jet. Boeing sold Spirit in 2005, receiving $900 million in cash. Wichita, Kansas-based Spirit AeroSystems makes major parts for Boeing. The parts are then shipped to Boeing's factory via rail. We believe that the reintegration of the Boeing and Spirit AeroSystems manufacturing operations would further strengthen aviation safety, improve quality, and serve interests of our customers, employees, and shareholders. Well, not if you're not going to create the required documents when you do maintenance. Doesn't matter where you do it at. You can own them all. If you don't make the documents that you can follow along, then you're going to continue to have a problem. Boeing said in a statement late Friday, although there can be no assurance that we'll be able to reach an agreement, we are committed to finding ways to improve the safety and quality of the airplanes on which millions of people depend each and every day. Spirit has also had its own series of quality control issues. The problems have become serious enough that Boeing had agreed to give more money to try to improve Spirit's quality reliability issues. They're hurting Boeing's own output. The payments came to an extra $60 million in revenue last year and $395 million in 24 and 25. 24 and 25. It's still 24 right now, so unless we're talking about some sort of creative business year. We haven't reached 25 yet. Those payments are 24 and 25. Those payments are an indication of Boeing's motivation for a deal for Spirit. It can't return to profitability itself unless problems at Spirit are also fixed. So about $3.9 billion of Spirit's AeroSystems revenue last year came from Boeing, making up about 64% of its overall revenue. It talks about Airbus, which they do some Airbus work also. So, initial report from the NTSB on January, the incident with the door plug on the Alaska Airlines flight found that the jet had left Boeing's factory in October with 4 bolts missing that were needed to keep it in place. But the reason that the door plug and the missing bolts were removed by Boeing was that the fuselage arrived at Boeing's factory with problems with 5 rivets that had been done by Spirit AeroSystems. So were removed by Boeing. Well, we've seen a couple other reportings that say Boeing didn't remove them. Spirit did. So they got to get this lined up and see who actually did the work. But of course, there's no paperwork, so how do we know actually who did it? Unless somebody says, oh, I'm the guy that did that. So even if Boeing was ultimately responsible for the problem, quality issues at Spirit may have also played a part. So the NTSB has yet to blame anyone for the incident. What they do know, it was an out-of-sequence work which caused the problem. In 2023, it used a non-standard manufacturing process when joining parts of the fuselage, causing a halt in deliveries of 737 MAX jets. And just a month ago, a Spirit employee notified Boeing that 2 holes may not have been drilled exactly to Boeing's requirements, which required Boeing to rework about 50 planes that had not been delivered. So Boeing has problems, Spirit has problems. Why not combine them? This is a story about Boeing selling the facility. So this is an editorial, and it's opinion and commentary about from let's see who this is. This is Dion Leifler from the Wichita Eagle. As Boeing looks to buy back Spirit AeroSystems Wichita plant, bitter memories resurface. Now this is an opinion piece. This is an independent work by this reporter. So he's going to relate a story from what he actually witnessed back in 2005 when Boeing sold this to what ultimately becomes Spirit AeroSystems. So it was Saturday, March 21st, 2005 to be exact. So it was a day I spent sitting on porches in South Wichita with Boeing employees as DHL Express delivered packages carrying news of whether they should report to work the Monday after Boeing divested itself of its Wichita plant. He writes, I further remember watching the bright yellow DHL truck as it moved down the street, stopping at every few houses to deliver those packages. And I remember the tears of the displaced workers, who were generally older and better paid after spending decades sweating and bleeding for Boeing, and thinking the company had their back. Workers like Johnny D. Jones, a 32-year Boeing employee who wept when he got his letter from Midwestern Aircraft Systems, the placeholder name for what had been Boeing's Wichita division, later renamed Spirit AeroSystems. The letter reads, we regret to inform you that you will not receive an employment offer from Midwestern Aircraft Systems at this time. Thank you for your interest in the company and for participating in the employment process. Now, Jones was 60 and had been a dedicated soldier of the Cold War. He started with Boeing in 1972, refitting and modernizing B-52 bombers, a key element of the U.S. nuclear deterrent force that kept the Soviet Union in check. He suspected he was on the chopping block after he was abruptly transferred from military division, which Boeing didn't sell, to a low-level job in the civilian aircraft plant that was being sold to Onyx Corp, a Canadian investment firm that acted as the middleman to do Boeing's dirty work. Now, the underlying reason for the sale was Boeing wanted to cut costs by abrogating its labor contracts and its Wichita workforce. The sale gave Onyx a free hand to make them all reapply for their jobs, shedding the higher paid line workers and renegotiating contracts with the survivors. It wasn't long until the successor company started pestering the legislature for job training money to prepare workers for its factory floor. And as I watched that unfold in Topeka, I remember thinking to myself, you had a trained workforce. What did you do with it? Now, Onyx made $3.2 billion with its venture between 2005 and 2014 until it sold off its last remaining stake in Spirit. Now, 19 years later, the sins of the past are on approach at Boeing. And it's a truism in any industry that rampant cost cutting sooner or later leads to degradation of product quality. If you're making picnic coolers or car stereos, two other things that Wichita used to be famous for, the consequences aren't all that severe. But when you make airplanes, every single working part has to be right every single time, or people can die. So Spirit's signature product is fuselage for the 737 MAX. At the writing of this, the 171 MAXs were grounded. It was terrifying and traumatizing for the passengers, but thankfully the seatbelt light was on and none of them were killed. Now, this incident followed other quality issues coming out of Spirit plant, including misdrilled holes in the pressure bulkheads that were discovered last year and the subject of an ongoing class action lawsuit. That followed revelations of problems with tail fittings for the plane. For Boeing, the Alaska Airlines blowout was the latest in a series of quality control fails, the most serious being the mass grounding of 737 MAX planes from 2019 to November 2020 after botched software in overseas airliners caused two crashes that killed 346 people. Boeing, you've got a long way to go before you get your mojo back. Buying back the Wichita plant would be a start, but it's only a start. What you're really going to need going forward is skilled and conscientious line workers who care about quality, do things right, and are confident enough to speak when something goes wrong. Guys like Johnny D. Jones. But it won't be him. He died in 2009, 4 years after you sent the DHL truck to his house. A poignant reminder when you try to hire less experienced and a cheaper workforce. So, last couple of things. Boeing's CEO is going to step down. Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun to step down and shake up amid safety crisis. So Dave Calhoun will step down by year end in a broad management shakeup brought on by the airplane maker's sprawling safety crisis exacerbated by a January mid-air panel blowout. Two other people are stepping down, Larry Kellner and Stan Deal, as they try to get control of the myriad issues that have shaken the confidence in the plane makers. So Calhoun was 66, was brought in as CEO following a pair of crashes in 2018 and 19 that killed nearly 350 people. Immediately after the January 5th blowout, airline executives expressed support for Calhoun, but those good feelings ebbed after additional production delays and as regulators detailed quality problems at its key manufacturing hub outside Seattle. Some investors said the shakeup would not be enough to address these persistent issues. Yeah, if you have a cultural problem, it starts at the top, but it moves down. And it has to stop at the top, and it has to really take a foothold so the people are comfortable with what they can do. Boeing shares have lost roughly a quarter of their value since the incident. They closed up 1.4% Monday off highs hit earlier in the day. They need more than just a shakeup at the CEO and chairman of the board level. They're just paralyzed from making decisions, said Robert Pavlik, senior portfolio manager at Dakota Wealth. It's going to take a little bit more time for Boeing to get it straightened out. So Michael O'Leary, head of the Airlines Ryanair, a top Boeing customer, said Monday the airline welcomed the much-needed management changes at Boeing, calling the shakeup good for the plane maker's customers. Calhoun said he made the decision to step down. It was me giving them notice that at the end of the year I plan to retire. He said he wanted to stay to the end of the year to address quality issues. Well, if you've been there, how long did you say you've been there? 4 or 5 years? That was your time to address quality issues. Not now that we've had another incident and you need to go. COO Stephen Pope has been appointed to lead Boeing commercial airplanes effective Monday. Stephen Mollenkopf, former CEO of tech company Qualcomm, has been appointed new chair of the board and is leading the search for the next CEO. So last week, a group of U.S. airline CEOs sought meetings with Boeing directors without Calhoun to express frustration over the Alaska Airlines incident management. They called the shakeup positive, but it depends on Calhoun's successor and changing the company's culture from the top. Workers' representatives echoed that sentiment, and it doesn't help that they're fixing to go into union negotiations. And the unions are actually seeking a seat on the board so that they can present their issues as well. Some suggested that Spirit AeroSystems CEO Patrick Shanahan, a former Boeing executive and U.S. government official, now tasked with a complex tie-up deal with the U.S. plane maker, was a possible successor to Calhoun. Now, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but here you have a guy who worked at Boeing as a senior executive before. He's gone to Spirit AeroSystems now. There were problems with Boeing before and now. Spirit has problems now. These are all quality and safety issues at both companies. You're getting rid of the CEO at Boeing, and you want to take the CEO from Spirit and put him in charge of Boeing. What kind of sense does that make? Makes no sense whatsoever. This is the last guy that I would want running the company. He wasn't able to fix it. If he didn't speak up when he was at Boeing, and then he went to Spirit, and they still have problems, then he's not letting people speak up there. So this is not your guy. Hell, I'd be better at it than him. So Shanahan's sole priority remains building a culture of safety. Yeah, how's that working out for you? At Spirit, spokesperson Joe Botino said Monday. Yeah, I don't think so. Doesn't seem like it's a good fit to me. But let me know what you think. Do you want a guy that has problems with safety at his company to become the CEO with problems of safety at their company? So replacing Boeing CEO Calhoun won't be easy. Here are some ideas. So this is AI. After recent problems at Boeing put CEO Dave Calhoun in the hot seat. The company announced that he's stepping down at the end of the year. It isn't clear who will replace Calhoun. The company announced that he told them he was stepping down. They didn't ask him to step down. The Federal Aviation Administration capped 737 MAX production at 38 per month after the January 5th in-flight emergency door plug blowout. And this slowdown is relating to the quality issues. So regime change is now essential. Aerodynamic Advisory Managing Director Richard Abulafa tells Barron's. Customers and the FAA need their pound of flesh, says benchmark analyst Josh Sullivan, adding he wasn't expecting to see anything announced as soon as it happened. Seems to me like it's a little bit too late. Sullivan's caveat reflects how Wall Street talks about management succession. If you like to call for someone's job explicitly, no, not at the top. They don't like to call for somebody's job at the top, but they're completely fine with eliminating the jobs at the bottom and bringing in a untrained, uninformed, low-paying workforce when you already had a workforce that was trained and knowledgeable about what they were doing. There are reasons for that. For starters, continuing business relationships are at stake. Do you want the plane or not? What do you care who's at the top? You think you're going to get a better deal from somebody at the top? You don't want them to cut corners, but you want to keep the guy at the top that's cutting corners. Allegedly. There is no easy answer about who is to blame for Boeing's current woes. Most analysts reference the late 1990s Boeing McDonnell Douglas merger when explaining how the company ended up in its current mess. So now you want to talk about a two-decade problem that you had 2 decades to fix or get into and get out of, but you didn't. Most analysts also credit Calhoun for returning the 737 MAX to service in November 2020 after its worldwide grounding for almost 2 years after 2 deadly crashes. Yet without Calhoun, they never would have got those back in the air. Boeing continues to bleed single-aisle jet market share to Airbus and has no brand new model that could stem those losses on the horizon. Well, if you keep having problems with your planes, you're not going to stem the losses. They're going to go somewhere else. And you can, the only way, the planes may come out a little bit slower, but at least they'll be coming out. They just need to be safe. So I don't care about the stock prices. I mean, that's what they care about. Of course, obviously, I only care about safety. Investors aren't a very forgiving group, making a change a possibility. 3 names come up most often when discussing Calhoun's successors: Larry Culp, Bill Brown, and here we go again, Patrick Shanahan. His name keeps coming up, and they don't care about quality concerns or safety concerns because he's got problems at his company he's at now. So Culp runs General Electric, a dominant supplier of jet engines and a key Boeing supplier. Culp parachuted into another crisis in 2018 when he took over GE. I don't know where he came from. I don't know if there were problems where he came from, but apparently he's fixing GE. Wall Street at that time questioned the choice, wondering if his prior success at Danaher would translate into a different industry. It did, as evidenced by the number of times analysts say Culp when asked who could help Boeing. He is, however, busy breaking up GE into GE Aerospace and GE Vernova. So they're moving from their power to their aviation industry, separating those. He will remain CEO of GE Aerospace. Brown, the former CEO of defense giant L3Harris Technologies, is tied up too. He was just named CEO of 3M, replacing current CEO Mike Roman in May. Of those 3, that leaves Shanahan, the current CEO of Boeing, and the supplier Spirit AeroSystems. Spirit also has its quality. Well, at least we're acknowledging that in this issue, in this article. Spirit also has its quality issues, but Shanahan took over in September. What's more, Spirit Aero might end up part of Boeing again. The 2 companies have acknowledged merger talks. Spirit Aero was part of Boeing until it was sold to the Canadian private equity firm Onyx in 2005. Shanahan would be a brilliant choice and Culp excellent too, says Abulafi. Shanahan has a master's degree in mechanical engineering and an MBA from MIT. Impressive. Still, he isn't a universal choice. Shanahan is a Boeing insider, was what I said. You worked there and there were problems. And apparently there were problems for 2 decades. So, working some 3 decades at the company before leaving. What they really need is a true outsider with a pedigree that is not afraid to sort this mess out, even though it will take years. Bill Brown would have been an ideal, but he went to 3M. Yeah, somebody that's not part of it. That's what you need. You need somebody that's not part of the system. Well, I've looked at this Air Safety Network. We'll pull this up. Now, this is basically right. What's in here now is basically just the preliminary report from the NTSB. But what's good about this site is it's updated by ASN users, the Aviation Safety Network users. Now, they don't guarantee completeness or correctness, but what I use it for is it's a good place to find a jumping off point to start looking at other things. You know, they, I think I probably went over this. Yeah. The CVR wasn't manually deactivated, so they don't have any information. The plug was manufactured by Spirit AeroSystems in Malaysia and received and installed in Wichita and shipped to Boeing's Renton in Washington. The reason the door was opened up, the plug was opened up, was because of the damaged rivets. There was an NCR completed for that. So we have an NCR, so there is some documentation. Like Boeing says, we can't find any documentation as to the door. Well, there's something. The NTSB has an NCR. So the NCR should have some more information other than the fact that the door there was damage. What did you do? There's no documentation that goes along with the NCR that says what you did to fix the damage? So there's something. So, and they, like I said, the NTSB did a complete review and found that there was no evidence that the mid-exit door plug was opened after leaving his Boeing facility. However, it was installed after the NCR repairs were made and put together and left the facility to do other work, the aircraft as a whole to do other work. They never took the door off again. There was no evidence that it was ever opened again. But like I said, when you come down here, you see some links where they got their information. So it's a good place in the preliminary report. You can pull it up here, but it's a good place to just look up any type of incidences like this and give you a jumping off point to start doing your own research. So yeah, that's it. That's my take so far on the Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 door blowout, as it will. I mean, 1 minute it's there, the next minute it's not there. Like I said, luckily nobody was injured on the flight. But if there's any more information that comes available, I'll update my mind map here and I'll come back and the video will be a little bit shorter at that point. But if you like this video, you like this type of content, make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. That's going to help this go out to more people. And I appreciate you watching. Peace out.